Hi, Journal Junction here. Welcome, my paper friends. This is a part of a series on sewing journals. In prior videos, I showed how I sewed the fabric onto the covers, and then another video I showed how I decorated the covers and how I did the flaps. And in this video, I am going to show you the papers that I've selected for the signatures, and I will show you how I sew the signatures in. Let's get started. All right, let's spin this around. So I have some of these old phone call message pads, and I thought, well, I'm going to try and get those in. We'll see how they work. I have a page from an old sewing machine manual, a yellow notebook page, craft paper. This is guide paper. This is an envelope. Oh, I wish you could feel this. It's got this really nice soft texture. Some more dyed paper. This would have been dyed with avocado peels and pits. Isn't that crazy? This is a piece of kind of like watercolor paper. Another hand-dyed paper. This one is an 8.5 by 14 legal size sheet, and I like this size because I can fold in the edges, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. I have this guest check. I don't think I'm going to use that in the signature. I am going to just put it aside. We'll put it in the book somewhere. I have this note pad. This particular one says, cherish your human connections, your relationships with family and friends, from Barbara Bush. So I'll be putting that in. I have invoice papers. I have graph paper. Actually, I have 2 sheets of graph paper. One I already folded. I have ledger paper, just plain white lined paper. Oh, this is from an old magazine called The Work Basket, and it's from June 1976. This is from a book, and it was all on sewing basics, and so I deconstructed that, and this is going to be in my signature. And this is from a songbook. This one is Beautiful Isle of Somewhere. Isn't that a pretty graphic? And music paper on the other side. This is a trading card sheet that, or you know, like baseball cards or that kind of thing can go in here. And I'm going to show you how we're going to use this in my journals. I'm basically going to cut it down, and then I'm going to fold it, and then I'm going to put all kinds of fun ephemera and sewing notions, that kind of thing in here. First thing I do is I take the notebook I'm working on. Let me tell you that these sewing journals, they're all different sizes. So you cannot cut all your papers down at once. You need to measure. And so I measured already, and I cut this particular piece of paper down to the right size. And as you can see, if I fold my book, it's in there nice. If I do need to trim anything down later, I will. So putting this back aside, isn't this pretty? I love this pattern. And look at this. Isn't this pretty? I don't know if you can see how sparkly that is. I think it's beautiful. Anyway, putting that aside, and like I said, the first thing, I fold all of my papers in half, or just about in half. This is actually 2 papers, but I thought I would leave them together. All right. after I fold all the papers is put them in some kind of order, and I like to have a nice graphic to be in the front, so I'm going to use this for the front of my signature. And then I just start putting papers together, and I don't pay as much attention to where things are going just yet. But yet I do. I try to mix up lined paper, plain paper, paper with pockets, the different colored papers, dyed papers, you know, all of those things. And I will be changing the order of these, I'm sure, but I just like to get them into signature form. All right, let's see. Where do I want to put that phone? Let's put it here. And then I'm going to wait on this one still. Bring the paper cutter over. I have a trick to show you with paper cutting as well. First thing I want to do, though, is get my template out, and I'm going to put these papers over here. I'm going to measure where I'm going to be cutting. And anything that is over that, I will trim. So this one is over, so I need to trim. So here's one of my tricks. Do you ever get these in the mail, these home magazines with all the ads? I use these all the time when I'm journaling. One way I use them is when I'm gluing down something and I have a glue stick, and in order to get to all the edges, these get the overflow, and then I can just take it, fold it over, use this part, or toss it. I have never seen this tip on any channel, but what I found, I don't know, once you hand dye paper, and or if you have some kind of paper that's more vintage, it goes through your trimmer and it tears a lot. And if you take one of these magazine pages and put it over the top, so you measure first where you want it to go, put this on top, just so it covers where you're going to be cutting, and it makes it so you get a clean cut. You don't get all that fiber in the groove of your cutting trimmer either. So anyway, so we got that one. Yes, small enough. These two are small enough. Okay, so this one is one that I was going to fold. So instead of cutting this one, I am going to just going to score it so I can fold it. And Okay, now if I were to have this in my signature, you can see the pockets would be way too deep. So I am going to cut off some of that. And I think I'm going to have this one go this way. And this one go this way. Okay, so something else that I like to do is make pockets that go this direction. So I think this would be a good paper to do that with. I'm going to just fold that up. You will see how this all comes together as we go along. I will be taking these to my sewing machine, and I will take you with me. And I'm going to actually sew the pockets up. All right, well, we've cut through all of the pages of the signature except for the dashboard. And you will see how this works later. If you've seen my original sewing journal flip through, you would see what this is. But we are basically going to just cut the top part off. So I am going to fold this at this seam here and try to get it to fold down a bit. So you can get these on Amazon. Like I said, they are for like baseball cards or something, and this particular kind goes into a 3-ring binder, and I'm cutting them down. And bringing all my pages back over here again. They've all been cut down. I do not want this one in the front. I want this one in the front. And this will be in the very front of the signature. And it's going to be full of all kinds of goodies. And then the back will also be full of all kinds of goodies. But let's see if this is the order that I want them. This up, get the pattern, cover, see if everything fits okay. Okay, we'll be edging some of the papers with some fabric. That's going to fit really nicely. Okay, we've got all the pages sized down, and it looks really nice. My next step is to take this to the sewing machine and sew up the pockets and add some fabric to the edges. Basically just stitch around some of the edges to create the pockets. And then, now this I need to make sure is the right direction, those kinds of things. Like I said, the next step is to go to my sewing machine. I will take you there with me. All right, I'm at my sewing machine and I wanted to show you that I made a template for my stitches. The numbers up the top here are the stitch length, and the letters here are the type of stitch it is. And then, needle in the middle, needle to the right, needle to the left, and then this is just a setting on my sewing machine. And also, you do not need to sew on your sewing machine. I like to sew the pockets and some of the pages on my sewing machine for my sewing journals because I think it just gives them so much more texture and personality. So what I am looking for are the pages I'm going to be sewing. So I'm going to sew this page here and here, and I'm just going to get right to it. And I start at the very top. I just want to go with a zigzag stitch. So I'm just going to go with a straight zigzag stitch for now. You can always change it up and do other stitches. So see how that turned out? Other side. Always start with the needle down. When you sew paper, you want your stitch length to be a little bit wider than if you were sewing on fabric. And that's because every time your needle goes in, it's creating a hole in the paper, and it's better to have it wider on paper. So when this goes in my signature, I don't have to glue the ends. So let's see, what other pages? I am going to be sewing on the top edge. And I can mix up the stitch. Let's do a straight stitch for this one. Some people leave the strings on when they stitch pages. I generally cut them short. So now I've got a pocket here and a pocket here. And if you don't want to sew on your sewing machine, just glue here, glue here. Card that I wanted to sew onto one of the pages to create a tuck spot. And so let me look to see if I have a sturdy page that could handle that. I like to sew those on a little bit thicker paper. Okay, I think I'm going to use this, and I don't know if I'll sew it towards the back. This page, I'm going to just stitch along. Maybe I will. Okay, I want this to be wanted to show you a little bit about what I did on this page. So I back stitched here and here and here and here, and then I changed it from my zigzag to straight line over here just to give it a little more interest. So now this creates a little tuck spot for that page. What I like to do is sew a little fabric on the edges of the signatures, and this is the pattern cover, so I would like to find some fabrics that might go with it a little. Maybe that. Do I have any? Oh, I have some lace. I'll use a little bit of lace. Let's sew it so it doesn't spur on the page. some lace would be pretty on there. I'm going to make this one a little bit longer. I don't worry about my thread color on these. I am not trying, I actually don't want it to be matchy-matchy. Okay, I want this to be wider. Let's see if this works. Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to sew. There was another piece I wanted to sew this one on somewhere. I could just sew that right there. That's kind of cute. No. I don't want to limit what I can put in there. This on this. Kind of like a tab. I ran out of bobbin thread. All right. Need to change the bobbin. Okay, I'm not really sure where my stitching video ended, but I was having bobbin problems, and so I had to replace the bobbin a couple of times. But we're back now, and I have not sewn this signature into the journal yet, but I wanted to go through the pages really quickly. This is that plastic dashboard. Sewn so the pockets can be there. Sewn so the pocket works. Another pocket. Some fabric up here. Sewn for a pocket. Sewed some lace on the edge. This other side, I sewed that belly band in. Sewn pockets. Another pocket. With all these pockets right next to each other, I may want to reorder these pages, but I will decide that just before I sew this signature in. And then this is that tuck spot. Some more fabric on the little edge here. And then the last pocket and the last piece of that dashboard. So I am going to sew along all the edges of the rest of my signatures, and then I will be back and I will show you how we sew the signatures in to the journals. Well, all right, if you've made it this far, thanks for sticking with me. Honestly, sewing on camera is way harder than it looks, and trying to wrangle all of that through the sewing machine while filming is a whole thing, but we made it. So I am almost ready to sew the signatures into the covers, but first I make sure that all the pages are in order and that they're right side up. The order that I want them anyways. And I also reinforce any of the fragile vintage papers with washi. I also use this masking tape. I also position the papers. Where I want them. I make sure that there's not a whole lot of pocket pages in a row. that there's a good variety of pages. Okay, so I had already reinforced those pages with washi, and now I'm ready to sew the signatures in. I use a 3-hole pamphlet stitch, and I decide what color wax thread I'm going to use. I am nearly out of black. I don't use white much unless I'm using it on maybe a new book or something not so vintage. But I measure out 3 times the height of the book in the wax thread, and I go ahead and I thread my needle now. And I use a large needle. Okay, at this point I push the papers really snug into the cover, and I use a clamp, and I clamp one of the edges down just so that the pages all stay in place. Then I just eyeball the center, and I use my awl to push it through the center first. And you need quite a bit of pressure here because you're going through all the pages, that plastic dashboard, and the fabric cover. And for the center hole, I push the awl all the way through, and that creates a larger hole since the needle's going to be going through it twice. Okay. After that, I go ahead and thread my needle through that middle hole. That'll help keep everything lined up. Okay, then I go to the top hole, and I use my thumb to roughly measure the distance from the top. And I punch the top hole next. And you don't need to push the awl all the way through on that one. Then I go ahead and I thread the needle through that top hole. Okay, so here I'm going to pull the back a little bit so I can get more thread here. And now I'm using my thumb again to measure. I go ahead and punch the hole in the bottom. And then I go ahead and place my needle through the bottom hole. From there, I'm going to come back up through the center hole. And you want to make sure you're not splitting the threads. Then just pull everything tight. Make sure that the threads on the back are tight. You can remove the clamp at this point. And you want the strands on either side of that middle strand as you come through, and then you just pull everything tight like I said, and I tie a double knot. I trim these to about 1 inch, If you wanted to add dangles or charms at the bottom, you would measure the thread about 4 times the height, and you would add them at this point before you trim the thread. They would hang from the bottom, but I'm skipping that since I'm adding a beaded bookmark instead. In my next video, I'll show how I decorated the inside with tags, foldouts, and other fun ephemera. I'll also show how I fill the dashboard with notions and other goodies. I'll do final flip-throughs of several of my sewing journals, and then I'll also have a separate video on how I make my beaded bookmark. Thanks for watching all the way through this one. And if you want to follow along with the rest of the series, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a great day, my paper friends.